Okay, so let's be honest, that was the episode I think we're all hoping for. As always, I'm Al, this is the Geek in Review, and I'm going to be talking about Star Trek Lower Decks Season 3, Episode 6, the Deep Space Nine one, because that's what I'm going to call it. So, yeah, I've been complaining a bit about this show, that this season of Lower Decks hasn't been as good as the rest. And the last two episodes, and by that I mean this one and the one before, made up for that, I suppose, but was it worth it? I mean, is this worth it? I don't know. Like and subscribe. But yeah, we get it all this week. Deep Space Nine, well-handled nostalgia, old characters and locations, which, by the way, look great. The attention to detail in this week when it comes to Deep Space Nine and the interiors and stuff is maybe some of the best Lower Decks Easter eggs and, what would you say, drawings, animations that they've ever done. It is absolutely crammed full of everything. The humour isn't amazing this episode, to be honest, and there's another dull story again. But yeah, that Mike McMahon guy knows what he's doing, and he really loves Star Trek, so let's get to the episode. So the Cerritos and her crew are on their way to Deep Space Nine, but their mission does get changed. They were originally supposed to be like sort of secondary backup guys, and they get put a bit more prominently to deal with a species that you might or you might not remember, the Karma, and they go all the way back, I think, to Season 2, Season 3 of Deep Space Nine. And do you remember them? I think before we get into this episode, we do get the Admiral that reassigns them, mentioning the Federation is still trying to make amends after the Dominion War. But we don't get any more on the war, or the Jem'Hadar, or the Vorta, the Changelings, and what's going on with that. So I was a little bit disappointed in that. But I'm just glad that Deep Space Nine's getting mentioned, because New Trek has, for some reason, completely refused, or 90% refused to touch it and even use it as a reference point, which I think is a little bit interesting. But yeah, they arrive at the station and we get that scene with the pylons from the trailers, and the gang's excited to arrive as we are. After taking a few trips around the station, they visit the OG Quarks, and we do get told, and this sort of does back up what was said in Picard, that everyone's favourite Ferengi barman now has a galactic franchise, or at least a kind of Alpha Quadrant franchise, which is still pretty good. And Jennifer's back, remember her, Marner's girlfriend? We hear a lot of her, but we don't often see her. And Mariner's storyline in this episode is definitely the weaker one. She's worried about meeting Jen's friends, and it's nice to see another side of Mariner. And I suppose this does kind of make sense. She is one of the main characters and she's gone on most of the adventures this season. So I like that they're kind of showing us another side to her and they're taking the foot off the gas a little bit. But as I said, for me, it's not the most interesting story this week. And while the rest of the gang's on the station, in this episode, she's mostly resigned to the ship. But yeah, let's get to the big Deep Space Nine of it, Deep Space Nine. And let's say all the interior stuff that we've seen in the show, we pretty much all get it in this episode, other than a crew quarters. We get the promenade, we get Quark's bar, we get new businesses in the promenade, we get ops, we get the briefing room, we get corridors with those weird kind of bumps in them that for no reason they had in Deep Space Nine, and we get the captain's office. So I know what you're all wondering. Let's get it out the way. Who's running Deep Space Nine? Well, it's Kira, of course, because you've got to remember, in the Star Trek timeline, Lower Decks is only a few years after the end of Deep Space Nine. While we, as an audience, have all the time to move on from what happened to Captain Sisko, Kira is still thinking about it and has a lot going on here. Although, because it's an animated show, it doesn't get too heavy. But the layout of Sisko's office is pretty much identical, with all his stuff like the baseball and things like that there. And the introduction of Kira when she walks into the office and looks out at the window and sees the wormhole, like, man, that was good. Like, you cannot say that wasn't for the fans and it wasn't well done. I wish live action Trek could sort of handle these nods as well as Lower Decks can. But it seems that she's no longer with Starfleet. She's back in her classic red outfit and her short hair, and voiced, of course, by the OG and the only, as far as I'm aware, Kira, Nana Visitor. And I used to call her Nana for years. Was that just me? Did you do that too? Let me know. And yeah, of course, it is absolutely great to have the original actress back in the part. And Kira being Kira, she gets into an argument straight away, but not with Captain Freeman, with Shax. It turns out that they've got a bit of a history, and we get a little bit of play back and forth between them, and it's nice and light-hearted, and it's good to see Kira having fun, because we didn't really get that much in Deep Space Nine. And she isn't the only one that's back. We get everyone's favourite Ferengi bartender, as I said, Quark. And this for me is where the episode kicks off. You just get all these people back, and you're back in the original setting. And it was great. It was just exactly what I think this show needed. And why did they wait so long to take us to Deep Space Nine? But yeah, seeing all this and being back in the station with these characters takes me back to when I originally watched Deep Space Nine. As I mentioned, for some reason, New Trek hasn't really touched it, and it's sort of confirmed that opinion that Deep Space Nine is, you know, the sort of forgotten child of the Star Trek family. New Trek, man, come on, give us some Deep Space Nine lore, give us some stuff. I don't know why you're not doing it. But yeah, it's fun and it's funny. If that's your thing, I don't know, is that your thing? And another addition this week is Tendi finally gets a storyline. She's not had much to do this season, and after last week's Rutherford episode, it's only fair. So when they're on board the station, she meets another Orion in Starfleet, who, at least at appearances, is more Orion than Starfleet. He's a bit of a Jack Sparrow type character. But all the stuff they do with Tendi in Rutherford this week, it doesn't really add to her character the way that last week's done with Rutherford, and you can't expect that every week, but I do think Tendi has been underused, at least since Lower Decks started, and definitely this season. I mean, they could have been on any station anywhere with any Orion, and I don't get why they didn't have them have sort of more Deep Space Nine adventures with the characters in the world that's there, rather than setting up this guy for the story to find out that, you know, he's not as Orion as he appears. He's actually just a bit of a sort of pretender, as it were. But yeah, in my opinion, the whole Tendi Rutherford stuff, good, not great. I've got no real criticisms other than I wish that the guys got to do more on Deep Space Nine. It would have been nice to see them in Ops. But while these guys are having adventures on the station, Mariner is stuck at Girls' Night, which you can imagine isn't really her thing, and it doesn't really work out too well for anyone that's there. And yeah, this is the real B story this week. They don't really do much with Mariner, but again, she's the main character, so that's absolutely fine. And the main criticism I've got for this is the same as the Tendi and Rutherford one. It would have been nice to see her be a bit more interactive with Deep Space Nine, and by that I don't mean with the characters and actors that are back, because they'd run out of things to do, but yeah, we could have met a few more interesting Starfleet or Bajoran crew members on Deep Space Nine, and they could have, you know, talked about what Worf is up to now and stuff like that, but missed opportunity, but not a complaint. But the main plot here sort of goes back to Quark. As I mentioned, the Karama, who weren't really villains, they were just middlemen for the Dominion, are shown back up. Well, when I say misunderstanding, Quark's trying to exploit something that he's stolen from them and pass it off as his own. So, pretty solid Quark stuff in here, and all the stuff in Quark's bar, again, looks brilliant. I don't know if they'd maybe drawn it from watching all the episodes, not all the episodes obviously, but some of the episodes, or if they did have access to like the sketches and designs, because that's going back to like 91, 92, but the detail here is just fantastic. And I just wish that we got to see the four main characters together on Deep Space Nine doing a bit more stuff. In this episode, I've not mentioned them yet. Did you realise that? Boimler, all he sort of does in this episode is play the games and Quarks and has a good time, which is, hey man, why wouldn't you do that? So I've got nothing negative or positive particularly to say about that this week. But the main thing for me about this episode is the love of Trek, particularly the love of Deep Space Nine. It's here, and it is plastered all over this episode from the opening scene. And what they've done here is they've balanced really well. What they've done here is they've balanced it really well between familiar nostalgia a sort of funny story and it's not overwhelming. There were certain episodes in the second season of Lower Decks that I did think they were going a little bit too much over the top with the Easter eggs, and this episode for me gets it precisely right in that nice sort of Goldilocks zone where it should be. And what's great about this as well is how they balance the story and the characters, because yeah, they got a few actors back. They could have probably got more if they tried, but again, I think that'd be a little bit overwhelming with the episodes and everyone would be trying to focus on the characters rather than the story. And this isn't a continuation of the Deep Space Nine story, it's more a catch up with life aboard the station. And I think for me, this is definitely the best episode of the season, and maybe one of the best handled Star Trek episodes of Lower Decks that we've seen when it comes to dealing with the old characters and lore. Because again, no one touches Deep Space Nine at all. But while I say that, I don't think all these stories fitted together. Again, it would have been nice for the gang to meet their equals or something on Deep Space Nine and interact with them and see a bit more of the station and let us know a bit more what the vibe's like, and maybe who has Worf's role and who has Bashir's role if he's no longer there, and who has O'Brien's role because we know that he's no longer there. So I get why they didn't fill in the blanks, because that sort of would have been supporting canon, and let's not get into the whole canon argument. But yeah, I really love this episode. I've watched it a few times now, and again, it's not for the humour. It's just for the fact that it's handled so well, and man, they need to give Mike McMahan at least a good crack at writing, possibly directing a live action Star Trek episode. I said episode, not season, because animation and live action are totally different. But yeah, if he wants to, give Mike McMahan an episode on whatever show he wants to, not Picard because it's terrible, and let us see what this guy can do, because he just handles Trek so well. But I do have a few questions though, so I'm going to get to that and do my little Columbo bit here. So first of all, where was the Defiant? Yeah, I know it never appears in Deep Space Nine title credits, it should be docked with the station, so an Easter egg that they could have done but they didn't. And this is another thing that I keep mentioning that I don't get about the show, is it doesn't have the physical or budgetary limitations of a live action show, so to draw the Defiant probably wouldn't have taken that long or been that difficult. And it would have been nice to see it maybe like swirling around the other side of the station when the Cerritos was coming into view, or just have it in the background. And yeah, as I mentioned at the start of the video and the start of the episode, they do give a nod to the Dominion War, but they don't really give us much information on what Cardassia or Bajor or the Federation or the Vorta or the Jem'Hadar or the Founders are up to, and where these people and powers are sitting in the galaxy. Again, I get it, it's a light-hearted animated show, it's not supposed to be gritty Star Trek, and it's not really supposed to be treated 100% as canon. I think, let me know what you guys think in the comments below, or you can reach out to me on Twitter at The Geeks Reviews. Were you happy to be back on Deep Space Nine? Did the characters that appeared on screen, were those the ones that you wanted, or were you wanting a Bashir or a Miles O'Brien? I really want to know what you think, and I'm looking forward to seeing what this show is going to do next week. Hope it keeps up the pace and the tone of the last 2 episodes rather than the first 4. If you made it this far, leave a like on the video and thanks for watching. And if you haven't done it already, subscribe to the channel. It's only a small click for you, but it means the world to me. Bye!